What's up, people? Hamza Shiraz back, Daily Boxing News. How you guys doing? Let me know if you can hear me loud and clear in the live chat. I might have to turn this mic down a little bit here. 1 second. We are clipping. Stick a limiter on here. All right. Yes, let me know if you guys can hear me loud and clear. Shout out to Gordon Dalglish, striker Rich Franklin. One second, let's just turn this gain down a bit. All right, that'll do. Yes. We got EJ, Charlene. What's up, Charlene? Dominica, David Fisher, Sully, Afro Gem, Oscar. Striker, of course, Steady Improvement, Supersized Fries, Afro Jam, Derek Clark. All right. Loud and clear, that's good. We can all stick a like on this live, it'll be much appreciated. Helps with the visibility of these streams. So, not sure how many of you have heard this, but a couple of days ago, Daniel Dubois pulled out of the IBF final eliminator with Frank Sanchez. The winner would have got a shot at Alexander Usyk or whoever held the IBF belt once the eliminator was done. Maybe Usyk would have vacated, or who knows. And the winner would have been perhaps elevated to full champion. But Daniel Dubois decided to withdraw from that. Why? Was it the decision of Dubois and his dad? Was it the advice of Sam Jones? Or was it the decision of Frank Warren? Why did Daniel Dubois decide to withdraw from this fight? I'm quite disappointed, to be honest with you, because Daniel Dubois, coming back from defeat in the past, has always been on smoke straight away. When he was stopped by Alexander Usyk, he went right in with Jarrell Miller. That's not an easy comeback fight. Then he fought Filip Hrvogic. Do you know what I mean? So, based on his previous form, I didn't find it surprising that he signed to fight Frank Sanchez. He's done that kind of thing before. So, it got my hopes up when he accepted the final eliminator. When I say signed to fight, he accepted the final eliminator. I don't think there was necessarily a contract in place. But yeah, he agreed to partake in the Frank Sanchez fight, but subsequently pulled out. Now, Frank Warren has spoken about this in an interview, and he said that if Daniel Dubois were to go ahead with the final eliminator against Frank Sanchez, he would lose his position with the other sanctioning bodies. So what? Frank Warren was trying to make out as though it was a perfectly obvious and logical reason why he pulled out. Oh, we'd lose our position. Well, guess what? If you become IBF mandatory challenger, you got a guaranteed shot at the title next. So what position are you afraid of losing exactly? It doesn't make sense. In fact, let's get the boxing rankings up here for the heavyweights. Shout out to Supersized Fries. He says, would Benavidez lose to Jai if they fought? I think so. I personally think that's a step too far for David Benavidez, but we'll see. We'll see how he looks against Ramirez, Gilberto Ramirez. I expect him to beat Ramirez, but we'll see how he beats him if he does. Shout out to everybody joining the live chat. I'm just going to get the heavyweight rankings up here. 1 second. Going to take a screenshot because, as I say, Frank Warren is trying to when I say justify, he's trying to make people who think that Dubois should have taken the Frank Sanchez fight look silly. That's the way he's trying to come across. Oh, obviously we pulled out. It doesn't make any sense for us to take the fight. So why agree to the final eliminator in the first place then if it was so obvious? All right, let me get this up here. Call it heavyweight rankings. Excuse the tapping. You guys can see for yourselves. There you go. Those are the current heavyweight rankings. Just straighten them out. Now, as you'll see there, Daniel Dubois is ranked number 2 by the WBC, 4 by the WBO. He's not ranked at all, by the looks of it, by the WBA. And he's ranked number 5 by the IBF. If he were to fight Frank Sanchez, he becomes mandatory challenger for the IBF. Now, Frank Warren said something about there's already a mandatory challenge for the IBF. No, there isn't. Not as far as I'm aware. Think about it. Derek Chisora is ranked number 2. If he was mandatory challenger, then that mandatory would have been called already. The IBF expedite their mandatories very quickly, but we haven't had an IBF mandatory called with Derek Chisora being involved. So, I don't personally buy that. In any event, Daniel Dubois pulled out. He's obviously going to go in a different direction. Maybe they'll look to match Daniel Dubois against Fabio Wardley. I like the fight. In fact, from a excitement perspective, it might be even better than the Frank Sanchez fight, but I was quite intrigued by that fight as well. Obviously, I'm speculating here. I've got no idea whether that actually will happen, but given the fact that Fabio Wardley is the newly elevated WBO champion, did I say WBA? WBO champion. Daniel Dubois ranked number 4 by the WBO. Fabio Wardley, I'm sure, could take that as a voluntary. But then again, Frank Warren's got so many heavyweights. Perhaps it'll be Moses Atalma getting his shot at Fabio Wardley before Daniel Dubois. Maybe it'll be, I don't know, Derek Chisora, who knows? Lawrence Okolie. What do you guys think of this whole situation with Daniel Dubois pulling out of the Frank Sanchez fight? We'll come on to the replacement for Daniel Dubois in just a second. And big up Supersized Fries again. What do you think, though, Supersized Fries? Do you think that Benavidez would lose to Jai Opetaia if they fought? Personally, I do. Big up Chris. Big up Fernie G. Big up Anonymous. Shout out to Steady Improvement. Afro Jam says Frank Warren is manipulating the whole heavyweight division. I tend to agree with that. He controls most of the heavyweight division now, right? So he's going to be manipulating it. Shout out to Mr. Luca. He says Dubois should not be rematching anyone but fighting someone new. Afro Jam says Dubois does not deserve a world title fight. He needs to work his way back. I agree. And the IBF final eliminator would be doing exactly that, working his way back. Now, some people would say he doesn't deserve to be in a final eliminator. Well, he kind of does, because everybody else that the IBF approached to take the fight turned it down. The fight with Frank Sanchez, including Moses Atalma. So if all these contenders above Dubois in the rankings are turning the Frank Sanchez final eliminator down, then they have to just go down the list, and they eventually got to Dubois and offered him the fight. He took it initially. Now he's pulled out. Lieutenant Frank says, who the hell is Gergen? God, I'm not even going to try to pronounce the surname. I have no idea who that is. The WBA do have some pretty bizarre rankings. Some very obscure fighters in there who I have never heard of before. Shout out to everyone joining in the live chat. So, since Dubois is pulled out, we can only speculate which direction he's going to go in, whether he's going to be matched with Fabio Wardley or another one of Frank Warren's heavyweights. In the meantime, Jared Anderson has accepted the Frank Sanchez final eliminator. You can see here, this is a headline from Sky Sports. Jared Anderson is set for a final eliminator against Frank Sanchez to become IBF mandatory challenger to Alexander Usyk after multiple contenders declined. US heavyweight prospect charting comeback after shock loss to Martin Bakole. Anderson, his record is up here, 18-1. That one defeat to Bakole, as just mentioned in the headline. That was quite a while ago now. He has had a fight since against Callias, who's a Greek fighter, I believe. Not many Greek heavyweights around. He won the fight on points, but he did not impress. He looked listless. He looked lethargic. He looked disinterested, truth be told. It was not the pre-Bakole version of Anderson. Because even though the pre-Bakole version of Anderson had loads of holes in his game, particularly defensively, he always fought with enthusiasm. But this version of Anderson had no enthusiasm at all. I have to imagine that the Bakole fight has really affected his confidence and left him somewhat disillusioned. Because, as I say, it wasn't an impressive performance. He's in a similar situation, funny enough, to Frank Sanchez, because Sanchez, of course, was stopped by Ajit Kabayel, and he also has only had one fight since that loss. He fought some obscure journeyman in Mexico and managed to stop him in a few rounds. So it's somewhat of a crossroads fight for these two. Now, obviously, Jared Anderson is a lot younger. He's, 26 now? Frank Sanchez, there's an official age, but with a lot of these Cubans, unofficially, and in reality, they're significantly older than their stated age. That's, I guess, one of the pluses of defecting from Cuba, because once you arrive in usually the United States, you don't have any papers. You just arrive as a Cuban defector, and maybe you can make up an age. Is that how it works? I mean, I'm guessing that's how it works. Or maybe you come with fake papers, I don't know. But the ages of some of these Cubans are very dubious, in my opinion. Frank Sanchez perhaps included. He's had knee trouble for the longest time. Now, anybody can have knee trouble at any age, but it is more common for older athletes to develop things like that. There's particularly heavyweights, right? NFL players and stuff like that start developing these issues, or the issues become chronic later on in their lives and later on in their careers in their 30s and 40s. So, yeah, Frank Sanchez also trying to bounce back, going in there against Jared Anderson. I think it's an interesting fight. Stylistically, Anderson apparently didn't want that smoke with Jarrell Miller, the battle of the big babies. Miller is a come-forward pressure fighter, very good chin, throws a load of shots, very physical, in your face. Maybe Anderson didn't fancy that with the memory of Martin Bakole still relatively fresh in his mind. Frank Sanchez is a boxer. He's not a guy that's going to come and put a ton of pressure on you. He's a guy who likes to win clean without getting rough and mauly on the inside. He likes to throw clean shots, the odd combination here and there, the odd jab. He's explosive when he's at his best. He moves a lot. So it's an interesting fight if Frank Sanchez is anything like the old version of himself. He's more fundamentally sound than Jared Anderson, at least the Anderson that we're used to up to this point. And he's got the amateur background. I mean, Anderson had a good amateur career himself, but Frank Sanchez, coming from that Cuban school, does most things well and correctly. What do you guys think of this matchup? Throwing it over to the live chat. Okay, Evil Uncle Phil says Anderson will get stopped. He's not mentally strong enough for boxing. Okay, Adrian says that he's a very good heavyweight prospect from Armenia. Wow. Armenia have heavyweight prospects? In fact, the only Armenian I can think of off the top of my head right now in boxing, there's two. Vanas Martirosyan, who passed away recently, and Vic Darchinian. Those are the only two Armenian boxers I can think of off the top of my head. And they were, smaller guys. Obviously, Martirosyan fought, 154 and 147, was it? That's Martirosyan, or did he fight up to 160? And Vic Darchinian was down in the bantamweight or something. I forget which weight class it was that Vic Darchinian fought in. Vic Darchinian was like a Timu version of Prince Nassim. Not just in his fighting style, but even in his ring persona. Yeah, he was like a knockoff version of Prince Nassim. Anyone remember Vic Darchinian? An Armenian heavyweight, don't think I've ever heard of one before. But I'm being told by Adrian that he's a very good prospect. Okay. Evil Uncle Phil believes that Jarrell Miller that is, will definitely stop Anderson within 3. Afro Jam making the case for Usyk fighting in the United States. I don't think Usyk needs to fight in the United States. The dynamics have changed. And I think the US fighters need to prove themselves by fighting in Europe now, actually. I don't think Usyk really has much to gain fighting in the States. There's no real big names that would bring big bucks. So Evil Uncle Phil thinks Sanchez beats Anderson within 6. Yeah, Evil Uncle Phil talking about the time when Anderson, I think it was in the run-up to the Charles Martin fight, correct me if I'm wrong, or was it in the run-up to the Piccoli fight? I forget now. One of the two. And he did some media stuff, like behind-the-scenes shoulder programming. And he was in the gym with Roy Jones, and Roy Jones was talking about, he was basically, playing the uncle role and giving him some advice and how to move in boxing and deal with the pressure and all this type of business. And Anderson burst out crying. I mean, they do call him Big Baby, but he's taking the name a little too literally. Man burst out crying. I was also alarmed. I mean, he's been talking about retiring at the age of 27 and all this kind of stuff, Anderson. I was also alarmed when, after the Charles Martin fight, they cut to a shot of him in the dressing room and he was crying in his mother's arms. I was like, what on earth is all that about? Came through a fight against Charles Martin. He's boo-hooing in his mum's arms in the locker room after the fight. Like, bro, you won the fight. What are you crying about? Weird. I guess Anderson is typical of some of these Zennials. Do they call them Zennials? I'm not trying to diss any younger people in the chat. Big up all the younger people. But, every generation is kind of characterized by certain types of behavior. It isn't accurate for everybody of that generation, but generally there's some truth to it. And with the Zennials, it's like emotional problems. They break a fingernail and they have an emotional break, Yeah. They have a nervous breakdown. That's the word I was looking for. And Anderson seems to fit that mold. Similar to the likes of Ryan Garcia. Do you know what I mean? Rich Franklin says Anderson gonna rock up in a bonnet next. Now that I would not be surprised by. Shout out to Afro Soul in the chat. Evil Uncle Phil says Roy Jones was probably so disgusted. Yeah, indeed. I agree, Wayne. He says, I feel like we weren't supposed to see that from Anderson. It was really revealing. Yeah, the crying in his mum's arms behind the scenes in the locker room after the Charles Martin fight. Yeah, I think we weren't supposed to see that. There was an opportunistic cameraman. The shot was cut pretty quickly. So he only appeared on screen for a second or two, crying in his mum's arms. Johnny the Frog says, Gen Zs are very emotional. Generation Zest. Shots fired. Triple R says, I thought Anderson crying in that Roy Jones video was like a motivational video, but yeah, it was cringe. Steady improvement set. Okay, he's talking to Afro Jam there. Okay, Afro Jam says, no happening. I'm saying the Saudis could have orchestrated this. Maybe they want an Usyk fight in the US. Okay, so you think the Saudis want to market themselves in the US, you know, obviously market their country in the US, and they want to use Usyk as the vehicle for that. Well, then the obvious way to go, and I'm not advocating this from a boxing sense, but if they're talking about from a marketing sense, the obvious way to go would be to dig up Deontay Wilder and stick him in with Usyk. Because there's no heavyweight out there, American heavyweight right now, that is the name that Wilder is even now. So if they're looking to match Anderson versus Sanchez, hoping that Sanchez comes out, or Anderson comes out on top because he's more marketable than Sanchez, and they're matching him against Usyk. How popular is Anderson in the United States? Like I say, even though Wilder's totally washed up, I reckon if they're just looking to get eyes on a Riyadh season event in America, even though Wilder doesn't deserve a shot, if that's the direction they're looking to go in, that fight would make more sense from a PR perspective for the casuals and whatnot. Steady Improvement says, Hatman, do you think Usyk has star power in the US? Would his fight sell? I don't think so. I mean, I want to say there's probably a lot of people from Usyk's country in the United States now. But I doubt his fights would sell. EJ saying, is it just me or is Super Chat not working? Supersized Fries dropped a Super Chat earlier on in the stream, so I'm not sure. But apparently there is some issues. Maybe try refreshing the page, because people here and there do seem to have issues and other people don't seem to have any issues, so I'm not sure. Evil Uncle Phil says, Usyk said he vacated for younger fighters to have a chance, but he fought Dubois twice. Rich Franklin says, no more Luke Partridge. Yes, please, no more Luke Partridge. He, above all other heavyweights out there, needs to earn his shot at Usyk, not be granted one. No legacy privilege, please. Wayne says, we've got a lot of Germans and Ukrainians in Texas. He'll sell. I'll be there. Okay. XMB says, Usyk screwed Parker for being a two-time champion. Well, I don't know about Usyk screwing Parker. Parker screwed Parker, right? He decided to take the Wardley fight, which he didn't need to take. But I guess you're saying maybe Usyk wouldn't have vacated? Maybe he was always going to vacate. We can only speculate. Johnny the Frog says, any news on Luke Partridge? All I've heard about Luke Partridge is what Gareth A. Davis has been saying, and that is that apparently he's negotiating an Anthony Joshua fight. And Turki Al-Sheikh seemed to allude to this. I think it was at the Eubank Jr. Conor Ben event, or was it? No, I don't think it was that one, was it? Anyway, some recent Riyadh Season or Ring Magazine event, Turki Al-Sheikh was alluding to something very special in September next year. What's up, Kayvon Green? Big up, big up. BK in the house. Evil Uncle Phil says the industry enables Fury, that's the problem. Warren has already signaled that Fury is going to skip the queue whenever he's ready, just like Garcia getting another shot undeserved. Yeah, Ryan Garcia jumping the queue, coming off a terrible performance against Rolly Romero. That shouldn't be happening. Big up Rich Franklin. If everyone can hit that like button, if we can get like 70 likes, it'll be much appreciated. We've only got 34 with 138 concurrent viewers. If we can get 70 likes, thank you in advance. Rich Franklin says AJ has got to get through Paul first. EJ says Super Chat definitely not working for me even after a refresh. Damn. Afro Jam says a good way for Usyk to market is to fight in America, then Zhang in China. Kayvon Green says, I don't think Fury is ever going to fight again. At least in a meaningful fight, the guy is completely shot. Silver the Reviewer says we're getting Jake Paul versus Tyson Fury next year. So do you think that Jake Paul's going to beat Anthony Joshua? Or do you think that Tyson Fury would fight him anyway? Let's say Jake Paul manages to last the distance but loses. Would that be enough for Fury to say, yeah, let me fight Jake Paul? Indeed. Big up Warren Williams. So many line jumpers in boxing. I do need to talk more about Ryan Garcia jumping the queue. Getting that Mario Barrios fight. That's crazy. Because he's not just jumping the queue. Hang on, what weight was the Rolly Romero fight at? Was that a 147 or was it a 140? Please jog my memory. Remind me. Shout out to Harry. He says, what's good, Ant-Man? Hope you're well, brother. I'm well. How are you? Okay, the Place Boxing says, yeah, it was the Junior and Ben fight when Al-Sheikh said that regarding the big fight in September next year in the UK. The special announcement. Oh, it was at 147. Okay. So Ryan Garcia loses at 147 to Rolly Romero, and off the back of that somehow gets a shot at the WBC title against Barrios. How does that work? The legacy privilege is crazy. Yes, big up Johnny the Frog. Let's smash that like button. Oh, okay, Afro Jam says it was a 144 catch weight, technically 147 indeed. Yeah, it's not only the fact that Ryan Garcia lost, it's that he looked terrible in defeat. That was a horrible performance. He got dropped early by Rolly, and then he was shook to bits for the rest of the fight to throw any punches. XMB says, no, it was 147. The Haney fight was 144. Let me have a look at BoxRec so I can find out. Crying Ryan Garcia. That's what I call him. Crying Ryan. It was indeed at 147. Yeah, it wasn't at the catch weight. That was, yeah, correct. XMB's correct there. The Haney fight was the catch weight. The Romero fight was a full 147 pounds. Yeah, XMB with the correct info. And he says, yeah, getting outboxed by Rolly is a terrible look. It is indeed. No names left says, let's be real, it's the Saudis deciding to give Garcia the new shot. Well, presumably you're saying that because they want to set up the Devin Haney rematch, right? Okay, my tab has crashed there. 1 second, folks. Let's get this open again. Where we at? Here we go. That's right, Crying Ryan. Tony S says, I think Frank Warren, for some reason or other, has taken pity on Dubois. He was ready to throw him to the wolves, I think. Dubois fighting a bum to rebuild again. Frank's giving him another chance. All right? Shout out to Ali for the super chat. He says, Hamza Shiraz is the ambassador for these Riyadh season ring cards. He always delivers on the cards when other fighters don't. Well, I don't want to say he always delivers. He didn't deliver against Adames, but he certainly delivered when he fought the Puerto Rican kid. Oh, why have I forgotten his name? The foolish New Yorican. Why have I forgotten the guy's name? It's crazy. That was a very good performance because Canelo couldn't do that to him. And Hamza Shiraz went in there, destroyed the guy. Balanga, thank you. My old age showing there. Edgar Balanga. He did a fantastic job on Edgar Balanga. He looked like $1 million. Hamza Shiraz in that fight. And he looks a lot better at 168 pounds than he looked at 160 at middleweight. So shout out to Ali for the super chat. And funny enough, right? Richard Dwyer he's obsessed with James Bond, Richard Dwyer. He loves James Bond. I think he fancies himself as James Bond. And actually, I dropped a comment on one of the videos where he was talking about the next James Bond. And I said, come on, Dwyer. We all know that you want to be the next James Bond, and I'm backing you for that role. But anyway, he suggested a couple of boxers for the next James Bond. One of them was Fabio Wardley, right? Interestingly enough, and he gave his justifications for why he thinks that Wardley should be the next James Bond. And the other one was Hamza Shiraz. Hamza Shiraz does kind of look like the Asian James Bond. He does kind of have that, Asian James Bond swag. I'm sure there's been many Bollywood versions of James Bond, I have to imagine. And yeah, I can imagine Shiraz doing some type of James Bond role. So that's the rumor that somebody popped up with in the live chat a couple of streams back. Someone was claiming that Usyk is going to fight Hrvogic next. Wayne says, let's get Luis Ortiz or Frank Sanchez to play Bond. A shout out to Ali. He says, Edgar Balanga and against Adames, he had a broken hand and he was drained at 168. His performance speaks for himself. Yeah, I liked his performance against Balanga. I thought he was very good. I thought his power was very evident. His jab was good. His poise was there. And he looked a lot better than he did at middleweight. It was a very good comeback for Hamza Shiraz, because there was pressure on him. Many of us criticized that Adames performance. Again, the broken hand, being weight drained notwithstanding. Shout out to Ali for the super chat. And the 168-pound division is kind of wide open now, right? Assuming Terence Crawford doesn't stick around, it's wide open. You got Hamza Shiraz, Canelo if he sticks around. You got Diego Pacheco, Christian and Billy. You've got Jaime Munguia. In fact, isn't Jaime Munguia fighting Billy? Didn't that fight just get made? Let me double check. Because I seem to remember Christian and Billy versus Jaime Munguia. That's a hell of a fight. Who have you guys got in that one? Let me just check here. Jaime. Christian and Billy. That would be a hell of a fight if that's made. Okay, yeah, according to Mike Coppinger, Christian and Billy and Jaime Munguia are in talks for a super middleweight clash in the first quarter of 2026. Very interesting fight if they make that. What do you guys reckon? Surely that won't fail to deliver in terms of entertainment. Shout out to Ali. He said, sorry, I meant drain to make weight, got spelt wrong. Yeah, I got the gist of your comment there, Ali. Big up Ali every time. Fernie G says Munguia is washed. He looked pretty good in the rematch with Shiraz, I thought. Although he did pop for some type of substance afterwards, but then got quickly exonerated. Interesting. I thought he looked pretty good in the Shiraz rematch. Tony S says apparently Usyk is thinking of fighting Hrvogic or Andy Ruiz. Yeah, Andy Ruiz is not a bad shout if they're looking to try and sell Usyk to an American audience. Then, if not Deontay Wilder, Andy Ruiz might not be a bad shout. He's got the Mexicans and all that kind of thing. Who would you like to see Hamza Shiraz fight next, Ali? If I can ask you that question. 168 pounds. Would you like to see him maybe get a crack at Crawford? If Crawford sticks around, would you like to see him fight Diego Pacheco? Shout out to Kayvon Green. He says, Tio or Shakur? Shakur all day. We'll see if that fight gets made. And if that fight don't get made, look, it's not good to be presumptuous, but based upon their past behavior, if the fight don't get made, I'm guessing it's going to be Tio's fault. Because of this new generation of lightweights and 140-pounders, the only guy that really seems to be on... Well, actually, Devin Haney's been pursuing the fights and he hasn't really been avoiding fights. But other than Haney, Shakur Stevenson. Stevenson wants all that smoke. So, yeah, if that Tio fight don't happen, Tio's the one that's got a history of being a diva. Shakur don't really have that kind of history. So let's see if Tio's really about that life. If the fight happens, I got Shakur winning that all day long. Kayvon Green said, I heard it was made. I haven't heard that it was made, but I've heard that they're in serious talks and they were looking to put it on Netflix. I hope it lands on Netflix. That'd be a great look. Let Me A says, I prefer the Ruiz fight if that's the case. Me too. I suspect Ruiz has got a bit more left than Deontay Wilder. Although he's been terribly inactive, right? He hasn't fought since the Jarrell Miller draw. Was it a draw against Miller? A controversial draw? He hasn't fought since then. Evil Uncle Phil says Wilder versus Ngannou was still an interesting fight. And they said that they were negotiating that fight. So I'm not sure what's going on. I think it's an interesting fight too. Marley says, who's more insufferable, the Partridge sisters and Little John Partridge or Wilder? At this stage, the Partridge sisters. Or the Partridge father and son duo, should I say. Yeah, the Martinez who had a draw with him, Billy, is useful too. He is indeed. Where was he from? The guy that had the draw with him, Billy. Wasn't Argentinian, was he? He was from some other country in Latin America. I completely agree, Wayne. I'd rather see Usyk versus Caballel, but the thing that people are speculating about is maybe the Saudis want to sell Usyk in the United States. In other words, they want to sell their country, remarket their country to an American audience, and use Usyk as the vehicle for that. That's the speculation that some people in the live chat are making. And therefore, you'd need the right dance partner for Usyk to actually publicize the event. And Ajit Caballel wouldn't fit that bill from a PR perspective in America. If we're talking from a purely boxing perspective and who deserves what, absolutely Ajit Caballel should be getting his shot. That should be next for Usyk. Guatemala, thank you, Afro Jam. That's where the guy was from who Christian and Billy just fought. Guatemala. Tony Yes says, Deontay Wilder did mention in a recent interview that he's got a big fight in January and kept saying two-time, surely not Usyk. It'll be far too quick of a turnaround for him to be fighting Usyk at this stage, I would imagine. You know, where's the publicity? We're nearly in December. So, that'd be a surprise to me. XMP says, who you got for Crying Ryan versus Barrios? Interesting question. Both guys look terrible in their last fights. Garcia terrible against Rolly Romero. Crying Ryan looked terrible against, Rolly Romero, excuse me. Barrios looked terrible against Pacquiao. So, If Ryan can rediscover any kind of his old form, he should beat Barrios. Barrios is terrible. He's one of the worst welterweight champions I've ever seen. Seriously, he's terrible. So if Rolly can rediscover, I'm getting all kind of people mixed up here. If Ryan can rediscover any of his old form, he should beat Mario Barrios quite comfortably. But he's so hot and cold, Ryan Garcia. He's so mentally and emotionally erratic that you can't count anything out. The box says Barrios Pacquiao looked like a fixed fight, honestly. I don't think it did. I just think Barrios is that bad. Barrios is trash. Did you see his previous fight on Netflix? I think that was on the Mike Tyson Jake Paul undercard. It was a pretty good scrap, but again, Barrios just doesn't have any ability. Yeah, welterweight is in the dumps. It's the worst it's been for a long time. Lester Martinez, thank you, Afrojam. That's the guy from Guatemala. Lester Martinez. Would Janabek beat Crawford today? I want to say no, but I think that he would give Crawford a better fight than Canelo did. Rich Franklin says, what the hell is up with Ryan Garcia? He reminds me of Kanye. Yeah, emotionally unstable, erratic, random thoughts. It is all very strange. XMB says, amazing how Barrios beat Ugas. That's Spencer's third best win. K1 Green says, Barrios or Rolly, who is the worst? I think Barrios is worse than Rolly Romero. I think Rolly Romero would beat Mario Barrios. Yeah, personally. I'd be quite confident of Rolly Romero beating Barrios. Barrios is terrible. He's terrible. Double A13 says, need T.O. and Hitchens to move up to welterweight to spice it up a bit. Johnny the Frog says, Ryan needs to sort himself out and stop crying. Amen to that. Crying Ryan. Wow, the Fog says, excuse me, Johnny the Frog. Oh, God. There's one person called the Fog Sellers and there's another person called Johnny the Frog. I'm getting confused there. He's just retracted his message. I was going to read it out. Afro Jam says, Barrios and Crocker are joint worst in the division. Maybe they should fight each other. You know what I was thinking about? If Ryan Garcia comes through against Barrios, the rematch of Haney, I might jump right out the window now and say Haney wins the rematch. Yeah, I might jump out the window right now and say Haney wins at 147 against Garcia. If they do it again. Because Haney's more mentally and emotionally stable. He's more reliable from a mental and emotional perspective. Yeah, he was traumatized by that first Garcia fight, but a lot of fighters are traumatized by experiences like that, you know? So you can kind of understand where Haney is mentally and emotionally, and you can see like a linear path back for him where he can rebuild his confidence. But Ryan Garcia is just so up and down, and his emotional state seems to be so random that it's hard to rely on him, you know? So if they do rematch at 147, I'm going to say early that Devin Haney wins. Lieutenant Frank says, so do we know what came of the Garcia failed drug test? Has it been dealt with, or has it just been swept under the carpet like Benz and Whites? No, he was banned. He served the ban. He was dealt with. Ryan Garcia served the ban. Yeah, that was quite well publicized, actually. Music Playlist says, Hatman, do you remember absolutely ages ago those boxing YouTubers called Boxing for Real? It was so bad it was kind of hilarious. I have to confess I do not know who they are. Don't think I ever saw their content. Double A says, I think Garcia has his number. They did fight many times in the amateurs, fought once so far in the pros. It's possible, we'll see. Personally, I'm leaning towards a Devin Haney win if they rematch. Because as I've already explained, I just can't rely on Ryan Garcia. I mean, him losing on points, being outboxed by Rolly Romero, that's a shocker. That is an absolute shocker. And the way he went out in that fight, he was scared to throw any punches. He went out so meekly. Like, no, I can't rely on someone who's that erratic. Devin Haney is more mentally and emotionally stable. And although he went through trauma following that Ryan Garcia fight, you can understand the trauma and you can maybe rely a bit on his confidence rebuild. Or rely a bit more. Wow, Afro Jam says they fought 10 times as amateurs. That's crazy. Marley says, what's your thoughts on YouTube boxing commentators like True Geordie and Wade Concept? I think True Geordie does a pretty good job, you know? I do watch his boxing videos from time to time. I think he does a pretty good job. I've quite enjoyed some of his live commentaries that he's done in association with DAZN or Ring Magazine or whatever it is, with his boys and his analysis and whatnot. So yeah, I think True Geordie. Wade Concept, he works for the Ring, right? Or he does a lot of content for the Ring. I'm not as familiar with him. I haven't watched as many of his videos. But I do think True Geordie does a pretty good job. Like a lot of his stuff on there. Indeed, Double A. He says, I know what you mean. Some fighters just turn up against certain opponents without logic. Boxing is crazy like that. Yeah, very, very unpredictable character, Ryan Garcia. Shout out to Atavistic Intellect. He says, what's happening, Hatman, brother? Just chilling, bro. Talking some boxing. We can get into other topics if you guys wish. The main topic, the showrunner, if you will, was Daniel Dubois pulling out of the Frank Sanchez IBF final eliminator at heavyweight and being replaced by Jared Anderson. He will now apparently fight Frank Sanchez in the IBF final eliminator. Be interested to hear your thoughts on that. No usernames left says, did you ever see the leaked True Geordie DMs? Put me right off him. Yeah, the less said about those DMs, the better. I mean, the less said about that, the better. All I can say is, in a professional capacity, doing boxing videos, I think True Geordie does a good job. But those DMs, bro, yeah, this is. And yeah, I think he did a good job getting rid of that Lawrence guy. Lawrence guy was very, very weird. Oh, for real? I never realized that. Tony S says Wade Concepts actually fought on a Misfits card against Arms and won. Oh, wow. I didn't realize that. Afro Jam says them DMs was scary. Can't listen to True Geordie after that. Bro, I couldn't even repeat what was said in those DMs on this live. In fact, I don't even want to think about those DMs. Don't even want to think about it, bro. It's like, whoa. Okay. Tony S says Wade for a Love Island contestant. But he looked like Arms, I see. Yeah, Arms is the guy that had that horrendous MMA fight with Bouncer, right? Arms Corleone. That was a shocker. Evil Uncle Phil says Arms nearly passed away after his last Misfits fight. Peds and dehydration. Yeah, I heard something about that. Oh, hang on. People are saying True Geordie got rid of Lawrence. Maybe I'm thinking of the wrong guy. Lawrence Oseki? I was thinking of the kind of posh British guy that used to be on his thing. Was he not called Lawrence as well? Was he called something else? He was weird. I think you got rid of him a long time ago. Lawrence Oseki, he's all right. But the other guy, the previous guy, that weird, like, posh boy, public school boy vibe, he was weird as hell. Marley says, yeah, I meant him. Lawrence McKenna. So they were both called Lawrence because there's another guy called Lawrence on True Geordie's videos now, right? Okay, so it was Lawrence McKenna. Ali says, someone tell Hatman to read my comment in the chat before it gets too far behind. Which comment is that, Ali? The super chat? I did read the super chat about the draining weight. I'm looking for another comment from Ali. I can't find another comment. I read the super chats. Let me see if there's another one from you here. If you want to write the comment again, I'll be happy to read it. I'm scrolling through trying to find another comment from you, bro. If you want to comment again, I'll read it out. I'll look out for it. In the normal chat, yeah, do me a favor and write it again because I'm struggling to find it here. I'm scrolling up looking for it and I can't seem to see it. Arcane says, so I did some quick research on these DMs and now I hate myself. The Fog Seller says, Anderson Sanchez will fail. They will not make a deal. 6 months ban for Hrvogic will expire soon and he will be allowed to be in an eliminator again. Sanchez Hrvogic will be a final eliminator. Why is Hrvogic banned for 6 months? Has Hrvogic failed a test? Or are you speculating? Afro Jam's comment is crazy. I'm just waiting for Ali to repost the comment so I can read it out for you, my bro. Because I'm scrolling up and I can't see the comment that you're referring to. I'll be happy to read out any comment you post now. Just let me know. Fernie G says, Hatman, do you think Tim Tszyu can resurrect his career or is he done? I think he's done. He looks shot to bits to me. The way he capitulated against Fundora. Atavistic Intellect says, Hatman, what's your take on the amount of women on Auntie D's press ants? I think they're designed to make women less empathetic and more masculine. Definitely think it's more deep than most think. You might be right as far as those, what do they call them now? Serotonin reuptake inhibitors. Ali says, I've wrote it once again. I don't see it, bro. I'm looking through the lot. I'll tell you all the comments that I can see from you. It's 2 comments saying normal chat, and another comment saying tell Hatman read my comment in the chat before it gets too far behind. Then I scroll down, and the next comment from you is I've wrote it once again. So maybe there's some kind of glitch, or you're using a flagged word, and because you know YouTube flags certain words. I don't know, bro, but I'm not seeing the comment come through in the live chat on my end. Like I say, the comments I'm seeing are someone tell Hatman read my comment in the chat before it gets too far behind. Then you put normal chat twice, and then I've wrote it once again, recent one. I'm not seeing it, bro. Is anyone else seeing Ali's comment here? Because I can't see any comments other than the ones I've read for you, bro. As it says, someone tell Hatman to read my comment in the chat before it gets too behind. Then it says normal chat twice. Then it says I've wrote it once again. Recent one. Yeah, other people are not seeing it either. Fernie G can't see it. So I'm not sure what the issue is there. Maybe YouTube is flagging a word and therefore not publishing the comment in the chat. I'm not sure what's going on. Kayvon Green says he's not seeing it. Rich Wrangler says, is Ali trolling? I'm assuming he's not trolling. He's super chatted several times in this live, and he super chatted the other day as well. So can't imagine he'd be trolling. Maybe there's some kind of glitch. Atavistic Intellect can't see it. Yeah, I can't see it, bro. So might be getting flagged for a word or something, some weird YouTube stuff. Shout out to President Brush. Big up Goozy. Ain't seen Goozy for a minute. What's up, Goozy? Oh, I see the fog sellers. Because Hrvogic pulled out the IBF Eliminator against Sanchez in June, so he was removed from the IBF top 10 rankings and barred from competing in IBF sanctioned bouts for 6. Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay. I see. Fernie G joking saying he typed Fury instead of Partridge and Google deleted it. Yeah, that's one of the weirdest things that YouTube does, right? Some people tried to super chat a while back and they were typing Wardley, you know, the name Fabio Wardley, and because it's got war in his name, it was getting flagged and it wasn't letting the comments be published in the live chat, weird stuff like that. There's a lot of weird glitches on YouTube with regards to trigger words that trigger the algorithm. It's a bit of a mess at times. Yeah, all good here, Goozy. All good. Arcane says, to be fair, I actually made this channel because my main one didn't let me interact with the streams. And I've never been blocked or had any conflict with Hatman, so sometimes YouTube just bugs it. Yeah, YouTube is weird at times, bro. He does weird stuff. One of the common things that creators will complain about and their subscribers is that they don't get notifications. They sometimes don't see the videos in the feed The videos don't appear in their feed even though they're subscribed. There's all kind of glitches that go on. To be fair, it is the biggest video hosting platform in the world, so it's not going to go completely smoothly, is it? And you got, what, billions of users maybe? AA13 says, Crawford feels like the only guy that ever won a war against PBC. Yeah, maybe. Although he still had to sign to him to get that Crawford fight. To get the Spence fight, Could you say that Partridge won a war against PBC? He never really seemed to be at war with them, though. Even though he fought Wilder, he never seemed to have a beef with the Al Haymans, and do you know what I mean? They worked well together, didn't they? Yeah, it seems like it. It seems like the algorithm just blocks anything that's got the certain words in it. But then you just type war there and it's come through. So I don't know. I don't understand the rhyme and reason of the way this YouTube algorithm works at times. It's very strange. Taylor says, Hatman, would Jake Paul beating AJ be the biggest upset in boxing history? It'd be up there for sure. Big up Hussein. Double A says, no, Fury and Wilder just colluded to discredit Joshua. XMB says, honestly, I think PBC fighters have more losses when crossing the street. We've got 51 likes, 159 concurrent viewers. If we can get the likes up to like at least 75, it'd be much appreciated. Everyone can smash that like button, please. Really helps by way of getting these streams out there, making them more visible. Only takes a split second of your time. Arcane says super chats might have a higher security layer to prevent bullying or something. I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine, bro. Evil Uncle Phil says, Shalom got grilled on TalkSport today. They even tried to ask him about Eubank's underlying health issues. Yeah, all I can say is that Eubank definitely was physically compromised in that rematch. That is obvious to anyone. I mean, Stevie Wonder could see that. He was definitely physically compromised in that fight for some reason or another. Maybe it's a combination of reasons. I did see Ben Shalom on TalkSport being grilled by Simon Jordan. Did see that. Hussein says, man, why does the US have the most serial killers? Big up Linkage. He says, Crawford versus Bivol at 168. I go Bivol. Yeah, I go Bivol over Crawford at 168 personally. How about you? As far as America having the most serial killers, guns facilitate a lot of it. It makes serial killing more easy. Not just in terms of unaliving somebody with a gun, but kidnapping somebody. When you got firearms, right, it's much more easy to kidnap people, isn't it? But according to the official stats, there's nowhere near as many serial killers in the USA today as there was back in the 80s and 90s. I think that was like the heyday of serial killers in America, was the 80s and 90s, for whatever reason. And bear in mind, America's got a very large population. Russia used to have a lot of serial killers too. Maybe they still do. But bear in mind, Russia's population is less than half that of the United States. shout out to Ali. He says, I would super chat what I want to ask. Don't know why it's not showing on normal chat. My super is not letting me super chat. There is an error. Yeah, a lot of people are saying that as well, Ali. YouTube doing weird stuff. But I managed to get your comment that you just wrote now. Obviously, I just read it out. So if you write it again, maybe, I don't know, change the wording, perhaps. Hopefully it will show up. I'll read it out. Kayvon Green says, I don't think America does. I think we're just better at recording. Yeah, I think that's a fair comment. When you think of a country like Mexico or Brazil or many countries in Africa, it's kind of hard to imagine that there aren't more serial killers in those countries than there is in the United States. Do you know what I mean? Because in a lot of these countries, there's no cameras. Particularly in rural areas, the police work is very, very primitive and shoddy. There are all sorts of cults, you know, certainly in Africa and even in Latin America. There are cults that do ritual killings and all sorts of stuff. You can count that as serial killers, right? And crimes are less reported and less detected. So I reckon Kayvon Green's making a good point there. There is a difference between, you know, the crimes that happen and the crimes that are reported. In some countries, many types of crimes are vastly underreported. Like I say, particularly in developing countries. Atavistic Intellect says, I think the CIA would use these killers as hitmen to do their dirty work. I watched one about this trucker guy who assaulted a woman, but they just let him go scot-free, and he went on to kill a lot more. That I absolutely 100 million% concur with. I think that still goes on now. I think that in many cases, the intelligence agencies use criminals to carry out dirty deeds, because they are putting a buffer between themselves, actual intelligence agents, and the crimes, right? So, like the police will use snitches to do certain things, the intelligence agencies, I think, also use dangerous criminals to carry out stuff for them. I've got no doubt about that whatsoever. So, speaking about Africa specifically, and travel in general, if we can go there, there's a guy, he's a Jewish American guy who has a travel channel on YouTube, and he has visited every single country on earth, right? Like he's visited 198 countries or something. And he was ranking his favorite and his least favorite countries, and also his favorite and least favorite cities. Then he did a video where he was ranking his top 20 favorite countries in Africa, or was it top 10 favorite countries in Africa? No, I don't think it was top 10. He was just ranking all the countries he's visited in Africa from his favorite to his least favorite. And interestingly, most of his favorite countries in Africa were in Southern Africa and East Africa. And his least favorite countries were all in West Africa, or most of them. I think Ghana was one of his favorites, but most of his least favorites were all in West Africa. And his least favorite country of all in Africa was Chad. Mali was one of his least favorite as well, Chad, all like West African countries. And one of his favorite African countries is the country I live in now, Zambia. And that's a guy that's traveled to every country in Africa, and he ranked them in terms of favorite to least favorite. And Zambia was near the top of his favorite countries. And I have to concur so far, I like it here. But in other parts of Africa, in other countries, the people are a lot more aggressive. There's it's more dangerous. There's more scamming going on. It's less developed, so on and so forth. Guzi says, sounds like Mossad. It might be. I've put that on the table before, that a lot of these travel YouTubers could actually be gathering intelligence, for their governments. It would make sense in this day and age. Afro Jam says, do you miss beaches, Hatman? Yes, I do. I'll always miss beaches. But I do like Zambia. It's nice. Ali says, is my comment still not showing? No, all the comments that you've put up, I've read. The ones that I can see, I've read them all. So if there's any one that I haven't read, it means I can't see it. The last comment that I can see from you here says, I would super chat what I want to ask. Don't know why it's not showing on normal chat. My super is not letting me super chat. There is an error. That's the last one that I read. And somebody recommended that you start a new account because it was happening to them as well. And try and comment from a different account. Yeah, it was Arcane Code says, Ali, you might have to make a new account, bro. That's what I did. I mess with the squad too much not to be in the live chats. Kayvon Green says, maybe log out and log back in. Evil Uncle Phil says, Itchy Boots most likely gathering intelligence. Is that woman that goes around on a motorbike? That's Itchy Boots, right? Is she from like New Zealand or Australia or something? Ali says, I'll switch to a different account I have. Yeah, there are a lot of lakes in Zambia, some very large lakes. I haven't visited any of them. I've just been in the capital, Lusaka, the whole time. And I've never been, have I ever done freshwater fishing? I think I have like once or twice in my life. But my thing is sea fishing. And since Zambia is a landlocked country, I'm not really into the whole, but maybe I'll go to the Zambezi River and try catch some tiger fish. They got these tiger fish in Zambia. I'm not sure if you guys have ever seen a tiger fish, but it's a ferocious looking creature. Got massive teeth. It's like a piranha on steroids. Apparently they're good eating fish as well, tiger fish. B. Wayne says, hey, Hatman, what's the biggest difference between East and West Africa? In West Africa, people are more confrontational, generally, more aggressive. And generally, I want to say people are bigger in West Africa, physically bigger. Marley says, what's your opinion on Myron Gaines? I think Myron Gaines is necessary. So it's the same answer I give when people ask me about Kevin Samuels. What do I think of Kevin Samuels? He's obviously passed away a couple of years ago, but my answer is always, I think he's necessary. I think this weaponized feminism requires a very, very strong pushback. And I don't agree with a lot of the sentiment and rhetoric, or some of the sentiment and rhetoric that comes from the Myron Gaineses and people like that sometimes. But I agree with a lot of other stuff he says. The point is, you got to fight fire with fire, to be honest. Truth Channel says, Hatman, remember you talking about Bruno disliking Lewis? On Smoke TV, Bruno actually went to meet up with Lewis to get it off his chest. You really tell what Lewis said all them years ago really hurt Bruno. Yeah, but since that meetup they had, Bruno has been dissing Lennox Lewis again. A couple of weeks ago, he was on a podcast with Spencer Oliver and he kept saying that Lennox Lewis is a snake. So apparently it's still not all good. Evil Uncle Phil says, Kevin Samuels was the GOAT. I always found the timing of his passing so strange right after he was on a TV show. Me too, I found it strange, I'm not going to lie. And Kevin Samuels was legit hilarious. In that space, Red Pill, Manosphere space, Kevin Samuels is without a shadow of a doubt, or was without a shadow of a doubt, the funniest person in it. I mean, he was absolutely hilarious. Just hilarious. The calls that he had with various women and the stuff he would say, and his facial expressions used to kill me. The glasses he wore and all that. He was literally hilarious. Shout out to Kayvon Green for the super chat. He says, people really misunderstood Kevin Samuels. His message was more about economics and how all these women are going to be broken alone at 45 with no kids. That's a whole fact. He was characterized or mischaracterized as a misogynist and this, that, and the other. But really, the crux of what Kevin Samuels used to say, he would get these women to admit what they really want and what they're really looking for, what they would deem good enough for them. And then he would explain to them that such guys that they would deem good enough and up to their standards are in ridiculously small supply, right? Low supply. There's a vanishingly few amount of guys that would meet their criteria. And because there are so few guys like that, those guys are extremely picky because they've got the pick of the bunch. They can get any woman they want. So he was trying to hold a mirror to all of these women with high standards and ask them, are you what these top 1% guys are looking for? And since you're not, in most cases, what these top 1% guys are looking for, then your standards are not realistic. That's basically what he was doing. You can want what you want. You can want whatever guy you want. But is there a realistic chance of you getting him? That's what he was doing. And he was holding a mirror up to these women and saying, look at yourself. Look at your behavior, not just your physical appearance, your behavior. And do you really think that a top 1% guy who isn't just 1% in terms of the money he makes, but also his height, his looks, charisma, so on and so forth, would a guy like that really want you? You know what I mean? That was what he was doing with most of his callers. So Kayvon Green is bang on the money there. 100%. Big up, Kayvon. K1 says, I'm turning 45 now. I have had 3 or 4 of my wife's casual friends try and holler, and I'm like 50 pounds overweight. It's super sad. Arcane says, what's the wildlife in Zambia? What's the wildlife like in Zambia? Is it tame or can it be quite dangerous? Well, they have a lot of dangerous snakes. Thankfully, I haven't encountered any. I haven't seen any snakes. I'm told you do find dangerous snakes on the outskirts of Lusaka. And yeah, definitely in more rural areas, they're more common and whatnot in villages. But dangerous snakes will probably be the biggest threat to humans because you're more likely to come into contact with dangerous snakes than you are with lions or anything like that because they're in the game reserves, right? The nature reserves, which are enormous areas, you know, of land where they have all the lions and hippopotamus and crocodiles and all that type of business. Whereas the snakes are not confined to nature reserves. And in terms of the deadly snakes they have, they've got cobras, mambas, black mamba and green mamba. They've got puff adders. They've also got non-venomous snakes like python, you know, the African rock python, which grow pretty damn huge. So yeah, snakes. But thankfully I haven't encountered any snakes. And I'm hoping I never will. I've spoken to many people in Lusaka and, you know, the ones who have lived in Lusaka their whole lives. And most of them say they've never seen a snake in Lusaka in their whole life. But then I spoke to somebody just yesterday who said that where they live in Lusaka, which is on the outskirts of Lusaka, they killed a snake the other day. I don't know what kind of snake it was, but yeah. Atavistic Intellect says, Museveni is one of the most hilarious politicians I've ever seen. That's a whole fact as well. And I've been saying this for the longest time. Ugandans are hilarious, bro. I put Ugandans easily in the top 3 funniest nations in Africa and among the funniest nations in the world. Like, Ugandans are literally hilarious. The way they talk, you know, just everything about them, their whole vibe is just funny. It makes me laugh endlessly. Zambians are cool. They're very laid back, but they're definitely not up there in terms of humor and just being hilarious like Ugandans are. Ugandans is funny as hell, bro. From top to bottom. Their politicians are funny. Like one of the funny Ugandan videos that's appearing on social media at the moment is from Parliament. So there's a Ugandan politician who spent some time living in the US, and now he's got this bizarre Ugandan/American accent. It's more Ugandan than it is American, but it just sounds totally bizarre. And every time he speaks in Parliament, other politicians, rather than addressing the issues that he's raising, they're just ripping the absolute pee out of him over his accent. They're rinsing this guy in the Ugandan Parliament because of his quote-unquote complicated accent. Ugandans are so damn funny, it's crazy. The president is funny, like everybody's funny. Yeah, even Idi Amin back in the days was funny, even though he was like this brutal guy and a dictator and all that. You watch his interviews, the guy's hilarious. So for whatever reason, Ugandans are just funny. Afro Gem says, how much cleaner is Lusaka than London? Lusaka is not cleaner than London, bro. Lusaka is still, you know, capital city in a developing nation. First of all, the first thing you have to understand about Lusaka as a city is that it's far less dense in terms of like buildings and whatnot than somewhere like London. So the layout of Lusaka is you have neighborhoods which are very spacious neighborhoods, right? You don't have houses all crammed close together. It's all like individual detached houses. Semi-detached houses are not that common from what I've seen. It's mostly detached houses with their own garden and, you know, fence or wall around. And then in between these like very low density neighborhoods, you then have the townships, the slums in between them, right? And there's a lot of like greenery and stuff and a lot. So the layout of the city is very, very different to somewhere like London, you know, very, very different. Then you go to like the center of town and it's kind of dirty in the center of town, but most expats, most foreigners are not really going to be going to the center of town much. You'll tend to go to the malls, yeah? And the malls are very modern, like what you would see in any Western city. And the malls have got food courts and they've got the KFCs and all the other stuff, and also local and South African restaurants and whatnot. So it's kind of hard to compare Lusaka to London because the layout is very, very different, you know? Particularly in the residential. The residential areas are very, very different to anything you have in London. It's kind of like comparing, I don't know, Phoenix or Albuquerque to New York City. Do you know what I mean? Like Albuquerque or Phoenix, they're far more sprawled out and there's a lot more space between the homes, and residential areas have a lot more space. Whereas in New York City, everything is crammed together. So yeah, no, I wouldn't say Lusaka is more clean than London, because Lusaka has got slums, the likes of which London does not have, like real slums. But in between those townships and slums, you have nice areas, which aren't just full of foreigners, by the way. There are loads of Zambians that live in these nice areas too. Places like Kabulonga, Roma. Loads of Zambians live in these places. Zambians that are, you know, middle class or upper middle class and stuff like that live in nice areas. They've got nice houses. I mean, the Airbnb where I'm staying right now is owned by Zambians. You know what I mean? It's a very nice place. Yes, I do have my own swimming pool here. Yes. I live in a 2-bedroom house here with a swimming pool, barbecue, all that. Rich Franklin says, do women ask you about your heritage? Of course. But that's the same everywhere. Well, it's the same in Britain anyway, not so much in America. But in the black community in Britain, the first question that any other black person is going to ask you is, what's your background? What country are you from? So, you know, in America, they don't really do that because black Americans have all got like the same, well, most of them have got the same background, so they don't really ask about that. But in the UK, in the black community, everyone's from Africa or the Caribbean, so the first question is, oh, you know, where's your family from? And it's the same in Africa, of course. They hear you got a Western accent. Oh, where are you from? And what tribe are you from? And when you tell them that you don't have a tribe, their minds are blown. They see a black person and the black person don't have a tribe. They're like, what? You don't have a tribe? You're not from, That baffles them. Like a lot of Africans are just not, they can't wrap their head around how black Americans and Caribbeans don't have tribes. They don't understand it. Afro Jam says, have you ever been in the slum areas? Are any of them bad? So, the most notorious slum area in Lusaka is called Chibolia. And I've never been there, but everybody tells me it's really bad. There's a lot of drug addicts in Chibolia, and everyone just says don't go there. Even Zambians themselves, who are from, you know, relatively nice areas in Lusaka, they don't go to Chibolia. It's just a no-go area. Stay away. Don't go there. Leave it alone. Oh yes, I can see your super chat. Thank you, Atavistic Intellect. Big up. He says, we need some Indian freshie security stories, bro. I'll see what I can think of. Ali says, had to word it differently. Can you see it now? No, I still can't see it. Can anyone else see Ali's message? I'm asking everyone else in the chat, can you see Ali's message? I can't see anything. I've seen what you've just wrote now, but I can't see anything else. So yeah, Chibolia is supposed to be like the worst slum, and that's in the south of Lusaka. There's another slum which is not as bad, but still kind of dangerous and sketchy, which is Matero. There's another one whose name kind of escapes me now. I can't remember the name of that other place, which is like more so in the north. I've been through the slums in a taxi, but I've never got out to start walking around in a slum, and I've got no reason to want to do that. I got no reason to want to walk around in the slums, bro. I'm not a poverty tourist, you know. The slums are there. They do what they do, and I do what I do. So, Indian Freshie security stories. Hopefully you haven't heard these before. Have you heard the one about the Indian Freshie guy that I was working with, who we were communicating on the radio, and I was asking for a staff member called Alicia. It was like some Brazilian girl, and she was wanted upstairs or downstairs, somewhere else in the shops. He was wanted by a different member of staff or by the manager. And so this Indian Freshie guy was down there where Alicia was. And I radioed to him and, asked, is Alicia there? And the Indian Freshie said, she's just climaxing with a customer. Now imagine that said in an Indian accent. She's climax, she's just climax with customer, she's climax. That's the way he said it. That's my best impression of it. She's climax. You want Alicia? Yeah, she's climax with customer, she's climax. I was like, Alicia's climaxing with a customer. And obviously me and the other guys, the other security on the radio, we were busting up laughing. And so the Freshie Indian got upset. And he's like, why are you laughing at me? What's funny? And he had some like glasses. He was like the nerdiest Indian guy you can imagine. Literally like Taj from Van Wilder's Party Liaison. And he was so upset. He's like, what's wrong with saying climax? And then the Ghanaian guy, who was the security supervisor in that place, explained to him, the implications, the connotations that he was making by saying climax. And he was arguing with us back and forth. And he was so upset. He went on his break, his like afternoon break, and he literally phoned home to India. Can you imagine? Because when he came back from his break, he started having a go at me saying, no, I called to India. I called to India. I checked with my friend. You can use this word. It's fine. I was like, chill, bro. I've literally grew up in the UK. I know what context that word is used in. And this man was trying to argue. Man literally called India on his on his lunch break to try and convince me that climaxing with a customer was okay. Yeah. What he meant was that member of staff, Alicia, was finishing up with a customer. She was closing a sale with a customer. And he referred to it as climaxing. Crazy. Most of you guys would have got fired in that shop from laughing out loud working with that guy. I'm telling you, it was too much. Shout out to Ali. He says, really sorry, Hatman, probably a glitch on a word. Not at all, bro. No need to apologize for YouTube's issues. Shout out to Ali. Atavistic Intellect says, are they anywhere near the roughness of Costa Rica slums? No. The slums here are not as rough as Costa Rica slums because there aren't many guns here. In Costa Rica, there's way more guns. Like, way more guns. So, yeah, the slums in Costa Rica are more dangerous than they are here. Here, guns are not particularly common. It's not South Africa, you know? So there's not many guns in this country. But in terms of poverty, the slums there are rough. You know, I mean, they're real slums, bro. When you go drive through the slum areas, it's what you see on television, you know? You see African slums on television, yeah, that's what you drive through in parts of Lusaka and whatnot. Triple R says climaxing. I'm telling you, that boy was so unintentionally funny, and he didn't get it. He didn't get why we found him funny. Indeed, Atavistic Intellect. He calling back to India to verify a British slang word. Yo. Shout out to Supersized Fries. He says, can Canelo win the rematch? In my opinion, no. Based upon what I saw, no. I mean, it's possible, but I think highly improbable. I think that would have taken a lot out of Canelo psychologically. So personally, I don't think so. But what do you think, Supersized Fries? Do you think Canelo can win the rematch? I'm assuming you mean the rematch with Crawford, not Bivol. I don't think he can win either rematch. Johnny the Frog says, closing the deal. I prefer the term climaxing, to be fair. Okay, Hayden says, I hate those Indian taxi drivers who keep trying to talk, but you don't understand a thing, so you just smile and say, yeah, awkwardly. Supersized Fries says, if he's more creative with his work, I think he can. Okay. I hear you. There you go. Johnny the Frog says, when Hatman is wrapping up the last live stream, or excuse me, the live stream, he will be climaxing. Oh dear, that boy was something else. And oh yeah, there was the Britney Spears one, that's right. It's the same guy. The climaxing guy is the same one who said he listened to Britney Spears. And he said it with a straight face. Again, think of Taj from Van Wilder's Party Liaison. And just put a pair of glasses on him, and that is literally the guy that I worked with in luxury retail, right? The freshie, that's literally the guy. Put Taj from Van Wilder in glasses, then that's him. That's who I work with. It was wild. In fact, he was more nerdy than Taj, right? Yeah, we were all standing around me. There was a white South African guy who I used to have the most amount of banter with. There was a white South African guy I used to work with from Durban. He was hilarious, bro. Me and him were always having all kind of banter. Then there was a Ghanaian guy. He was hilarious too. And a Brazilian guy. So all of us, the Brazilian, the Ghanaian, me, Caribbean, the white South African guy, we were just cracking up in that store non-stop all day long. And yeah, we were standing around and we once asked the Indian guy, like, what music he listens to, other than his own music from India. And he was like, yeah, I like it, Britney Spears, Britney Spears. And he started singing his version of the Britney Spears song Toxic in an Indian accent, if you can imagine that. Crazy. It was wild funny. Shout out to Ali for the super chat. He says, I'll ask a different question. Name me the top 5 cruiserweights in the UK. Wayne says, so he climaxes to Britney. All right, top 5 cruiserweights in the UK. I think Pat Brown is already in the top 5. So I'm going to put Pat Brown in there. Chris Smith is in there. Vidal Riley. Pat Brown, Chris Smith, Vidal Riley. Who else is in there? Am I even ready to put Alois Jr. in the top 5? I'm not sure. Go on then, I'll put Alois Jr. in there. And one more would be, could Chef Clark be in the top 5? Maybe Chef Clark. Shout out to Ali for the super chat. Did anyone try to steal anything? Yeah. There was actually a time when a member of staff was stealing. When I was working in luxury retail, there was a Polish guy who was like smuggling out stuff and God knows what he was doing, but we caught him. A Polish guy was stealing stuff. Oh yeah, Jack Massey. Maybe he could go in the top 5. Arcane says, what happened to Freezer McBones? I'm going to guess that there was an issue with his residency in the UK. Because he had 1 or 2 fights with Frank Warren, and then all of a sudden he's back fighting in Ghana, where he's originally from. So I'm going to guess that there's an issue with his residency or his ability to work in the UK. And that's why he kind of went missing. But yeah, he's been fighting in Ghana. Shout out to Ali for the super chat. He says, no Isaac Chamberlain. No, Chamberlain's been looking real bad of late. He obviously lost to Chris Smith a few years ago. Struggled past. God, who's the guy he struggled past? The Nigerian guy. I forget his name now. Who Vidal Riley beat. Actually, no. Isaac Chamberlain beat him easy. I forget the guy's name now. I probably wouldn't put Isaac Chamberlain in the top 5. I probably wouldn't. Shout out to Jaden. He says, how successful can Jai be at heavyweight? And shout out to Ali again for the super chat. Jai at heavyweight. Yeah, thank you. Lawal, that's the guy I was thinking of, Afro Jam. It really depends on who's around at heavyweight still when Jai Opetaia moves up. Depends who's around. And the thing is, Opetaia might do better against bigger, slower, clunkier guys. The next generation of heavyweights coming through seem to be smaller, faster guys like Itama, Richard Torres. I don't know whether he'll hold up as well against those guys because they have the power and the strength of the bigger guys, but they're so much faster. So, I don't know, man. I think Jai Opetaia will be a player when he moves up to heavyweight. I think he'll be, at the very least, a top 10 contender. But I'm not as confident in Opetaia's chances at heavyweight as I was in Usyk's chances at heavyweight. Because when Usyk moved up, I was saying that I think he's going to knock off at least one of the big names. I'm not so confident that Opetaia will do that. He doesn't have the skill that Usyk has. He's very athletic, he's vicious, he can punch, he's fast. He doesn't have the solid fundamentals that Usyk has. Not that he's got bad fundamentals, but Usyk's fundamentals are just so impeccable. Oh wow, even Uncle Phil says Freezy is on the December Matchroom undercard. Is that right? Is that in the UK? Afro Jam says Chamberlain is inactive since he ducked Riley. Oh, are you talking about the fight in the Nigeria card? Okay, so Freezy's on the Nigeria card. So if that's the case, then yeah, it might kind of validate my suspicion that there's an issue with Freezy working in the UK. There's some type of immigration issue. Atavistic Intellect says, I lived in a student accommodation with this freshy Indian. We were smoking puff with him, and he came and said, do you like the brown sugar? And it turned out he was a heroin addict. Whoa! Whoa. Before I left the UK, I was living in a relatively nice part of London. And Johnny the Frog says Atama can bench press 140 kilos. I'm sure he can bench press a lot more than that. I could probably bench press 140 kilos, and I don't even bench. I do push-ups and whatnot. I'm sure you can bench a lot more than that in terms of for one rep or a couple of reps. But yeah, before I left the UK, I was living in quite a nice area of London, and there was a little park not too far from my house, and there was a track down there where I used to do sprints. I'd usually go at night, so there was nobody walking on that track. And during one summer, there was an Indian guy, a freshy Indian guy, who used to bun weed and drink, he'd have like a bottle of vodka or something. And he was sat on that bench, and he'd always try and start conversations with me when I was doing my sprints. And he obviously was dealing with some stuff. He was obviously going through it. But yeah, he was like a freshy Indian, not a Pakistani guy, an Indian. And he was always bunning weed and drinking himself into oblivion. Supersized Fries says, is rent expensive where you are? No, it's not. It's cheap. It's very cheap. In Lusaka, you can easily get a modern, with modern appliances, modern fittings, totally modern house, 3 bedrooms, all that kind of stuff for about £400 a month in Lusaka. The catch is, right, if you want an unfurnished house or apartment in Lusaka, it's going to be very cheap. But if you want a furnished place, it's way more expensive. The disparity between furnished and unfurnished in terms of price is massive in Zambia. Far bigger than it is in the UK. In the UK, the difference between a furnished or unfurnished apartment is not that big in terms of price. But for whatever reason in Zambia, it's massive. I mean, they will literally triple the price if the place is furnished versus unfurnished. It's crazy. They'll triple the monthly rent if it's a furnished place rather than unfurnished. So, but even when they triple the price, I mean, for example, I live in a 2-bedroom house with a swimming pool in a gated community, 24-hour security, Starlink internet, all bills included, solar power as well as, electricity grid power, and a diesel generator, just to make absolute sure that I'm never without power. Starlink internet, as I've mentioned, all of this, and it's costing me like £900 a month. Okay, that's an Airbnb. Airbnb places are way above the market rate. Yeah, So if I were to go through like a normal landlord rather than going for Airbnb, I'd pay way cheaper than £900 a month for a place like this. But I mean, you compare it to anywhere in the UK, I'd be paying probably £3,000 a month for this place in the UK. In London, probably more than that. Think about everything it has. A swimming pool, 2 bedrooms, all modern fitted. It's got air conditioning. It's got solar panels, it's got a generator and grid electricity. Internet included, all bills included. £900 a month. In the UK, I'm telling you, that's £3,000, even outside of London. Inside London, probably £5,000 a month or something crazy. Shout out to Striker for the super chat. He says, what do you make of Lampley saying Benavidez could be a factor at heavyweight? I think Lampley is losing his mind. I think senility is creeping in. I saw the DMs. Was it with Sean Zittel, who asked him about Benavidez, and he reckons Benavidez will be a threat to Usyk? And yeah, I think he's way out there at this stage, Jim Lampley. Way, way, way out there. No, I don't think Benavidez is going to be an issue at heavyweight. I think Opetaia at cruiserweight will be too much for Benavidez. And I'm somebody who rates Benavidez very highly, and I think he's a massive problem for Beterbiev and Bivol. But heavyweight, no. I think he'll beat Ramirez, but Ramirez is moving up in weight just like Benavidez, right? He started out at 168 pounds like Benavidez did. So they're in the same boat. But heavyweight, no. I think Lampley is buzzing with that one. Shout out to Ali for the super chat. He says, prediction for Fraser versus TKV for the British title. It's a very, very difficult matchup for me to predict because they're both pretty much pure boxers. Yeah, neither guy is really adept at fighting. They're both good at boxing, if that makes sense. Yeah, neither man is good in a fight, but they're both good in a boxing match. So, I don't know. I mean, TKV is smaller. He's a bit more slick. Fraser Clark, I mean, it's a real close fight in my head. I'm leaning slightly towards Fraser Clark, but not by much. Because again, TKV is the slicker guy. He's a lot more fluid than Fraser Clark, you know? But I edge slightly towards Clark in the fight. What do you think though, Ali? Who have you got in that one? And to answer Leo's question, do I think Canelo would have taken a beating against Benavidez based on his last few performances? Yes. I think Canelo would have taken a beating, and I think he knew he would have taken a beating. That's why the fight didn't happen. Amali says, Hatman, if you play Ghost of Tsushima, if so, is it battle good? Do it without spoilers. I have that game, and I only played about an hour of it, to be honest, so I couldn't even give you any spoilers. Because I only ever played about an hour of it, and I never went back to it. It seems all very impressive from a technical perspective, but somehow it just didn't draw me in. I'm certainly not saying it's a bad game, but maybe you have to be more interested in the subject matter, you know? And I do like ancient history and different cultures and whatnot, but somehow just wasn't drawn in by Ghost of Tsushima. How does the cost of living compare to Costa Rica in Zambia? Zambia is a lot cheaper than Costa Rica. Yeah, Zambia is a lot cheaper than Costa Rica. Atomistic Intellect says, this guy was doing a master's in engineering. For those who haven't caught, he's talking about an Indian guy he used to live with, I think, who was also on heroin, this Indian guy, randomly. Says this guy was doing a master's in engineering. It was crazy, bro. He was like a movie character. When he had beef, he'd unbuckle his belt, and him being like 4'11" made it absolutely comical. Corpen says, when is Leo Atang fighting again? I'm not sure. Johnny the Frog says, the tigerfish and poisonous snakes don't worry me. Okay. Supersized Fry says, that's one of the best games ever made. It's fantastic and the sequel's even better. Shout out to Ali, he says, TKV based on his performance against Adelaide, who is levels above Fraser. Higher caliber, clear win for TKV. All right. We shall see if the fight goes ahead. It's been rescheduled, right? We will see. But I would lean slightly towards Fraser. Is Adelaide levels above Fraser? Fraser gave Wardley a real good fight first time around. Adelaide was competitive with Wardley for a few rounds, but then he got stopped in, what was it, 7? But then Fraser got blasted out in 1 round in the Wardley rematch. So, I know, it's kind of hard to compare them, but styles make fights. And there's 2 boxers in there. Clark is a boxer. TKV is a boxer. TKV is the more fluid of the 2, but he's smaller. I'm guessing he's less physically strong. Could go either way, but I'm leaning slightly towards Fraser Clark, personally. But shout out to Ali for the super chat. Hayden says, do you believe in Tartaria or Atlantis? Well, the Tartars were a real culture. As far as a lot of the, how could I describe it, mythology that's been subsequently attached to Tartaria on the internet in recent years, people are making some massive leaps in logic and whatnot when it comes to the Tartaria stuff. I'm not dismissing every aspect of it completely, but from what I've seen, the videos about Tartaria and everything, I don't think people are being scholarly enough in their research. That's what I will say. They're a bit too, they're a bit too quick to jump to conclusions. You need to be a bit more scholarly than that. So that's what I'll say about Tartaria. Interesting, and it is a culture, a civilization that in the West we don't really know that much about, or I didn't learn much about growing up. Never heard of it in school or anything like that. But yeah, obviously the Tartars were a real culture, a real group. Hence, you have tartar sauce. As far as Atlantis, I've got no idea. I have no idea. Graham Hancock believes that Atlantis was not a city in the middle of the, an island in the middle of the Atlantic. He believes it was a seafaring coastal culture that was global. And through the passage of time and the Chinese whispers effect, it's ended up just being this one island in the middle of the Atlantic. But he thinks it was actually a coastal civilization, maritime civilization, which was wiped out 12,000 years ago because of a comet impact that hit the ice sheet in North America and caused a massive rise in sea levels in a very short space of time. And that basically wiped out this coastal culture, which today would be classed as Atlantis. And it's an interesting theory that Graham Hancock has. He does have some scientific data to back up his hypothesis, his theory. It's interesting. Doesn't mean it's right, but it's interesting. Shout out to Ali for the super chat. He says, the same right hand that put a hole and dented his jaw in the second fight, if Adelai's left hand landed the same way, the outcome would have been the same. But could Adelai land that left hand on Frazer Clarke? And even if that's true, right? Even if Adelai could beat Frazer Clarke, styles make fights. You know, it's like with, I always go back to the most famous example being Muhammad Ali, Joe Frazier, and George Foreman and Ken Norton in the 1970s. So Ali gets beat by Joe Frazier, he gets beat by Ken Norton. George Foreman comes along, wipes out Joe Frazier and Ken Norton in 2 rounds apiece. Then he goes in there with Ali and gets stopped in 8 rounds. Boxing is not linear in that sense. It's styles make fights. It's like rock, paper, scissors, you know? You know the game rock, paper, scissors? The rock defeats the scissors defeat the paper, but the paper defeats the rock. Boxing is like that too. So we don't know if Adelai would beat Frazer Clarke, but let's just, for argument's sake, say he would. That doesn't necessarily mean that Frazer Clarke can't beat Jamie TKV. You know, it's all about styles, how the styles match up against each other. And TKV and Clarke have both got a boxing, you know, they're both boxers. They're not brawlers, they're not pressure fighters, they're not big punchers, either of them. They're both like technical boxers. It's just that Clarke has got the advantage in size and amateur credentials. And TKV's got the advantage in speed and fluidity. So we'll see. It's going to be interesting. Shout out to Ali for the super chat. Shout out to Arcane Code. He says, Hammond, do you think it's possible for humanity to experience an ideological revolution similar to the Renaissance era ever again? Absolutely, yes. In fact, I think it's inevitable. I think it's inevitable that, you know, I think these things probably go in cycles. So absolutely, because the Renaissance came around for a few different reasons, okay? First of all, Europe went heavily into Christianity, right? When the Roman Empire fell, Europe kind of fell with it. It went into what they call the Dark Ages, all right? When Rome withdrew from all its old territories. Remember, Rome was the quote-unquote civilizing force. Before the Romans arrived in Britain and many other parts of Europe, it was extremely underdeveloped technologically, right? So Rome came along and introduced all this technology to Western Europe and all this kind of thing. They introduced Christianity and whatnot. And when the Romans withdrew, as I say, Europe kind of fell into disrepair. As far as history tells us, it fell into the Dark Ages. Now, the Dark Ages were a time of poverty combined with Christianity, like pretty hardcore Christianity and poverty combined. And it started coming out of the Dark Ages partly because people, the intelligentsia, were rediscovering ancient pre-Christian, pre-Abrahamic cultures, right? They were looking at Greece, pagan Rome, you know, pre-Christian pagan Rome, Egypt, so on and so forth, right? They started looking into all that, the intelligentsia, and reviving the ideas that those pre-Abrahamic cultures had. And that is part of the reason that you had the Renaissance, yeah? Also, it has to be said, there was the influence of the Moors that helped bring Europe out of the Dark Ages from a technological perspective, because the Moors did introduce a lot of technology into Europe. Obviously, they didn't control the whole of Europe. It was only like Spain, Portugal, and part of France, right? Maybe a few other bits of the Mediterranean. But the Moors did introduce a lot of technology into Europe, and that helped eventually, when the Moors were kicked out, the Europeans were left with a lot of the technology that the Moors introduced to them. Military technology, stuff regarding mathematics, chemistry, astronomy, etc., etc. So, yeah, those two things combined, reconnecting with pre-Abrahamic ideas and cultures and drawing inspiration from them in terms of philosophy and what have you, kind of expanding the mind, and the technological, how could you describe it? The technological leftovers, if you will. It's not really the best way to describe it, that the Moors introduced kind of helped bring Europe out of that slump of the Dark Ages. And those rise and falls of civilization, I have to imagine are going to continue. It's going to continue. I mean, you look at Iraq. Iraq once was, if not the most, certainly one of the most powerful nations on earth in the ancient world, right? As Babylon and Mesopotamia and all that, it was extremely powerful. Now it's not so powerful. So civilizations rise and fall and go up and down, and I'm sure that pattern will continue. I'm sure it will. And reconnecting with like ancient cultures and whatnot, and the philosophy of bygone eras will help bring certain cultures out of a slump. And yeah, that's my view. These things go in cycles. Shout out to Arcane Code. Shout out to Ali. He says, let's bet and put money on the table then. Adelaide versus Fraser 1. I can promise you Adelaide will dispatch Clark if they fought would KO him unconscious. Ali, are you Muslim? Are you supposed to bet if you're Muslim? Why are we putting money on it? Isn't that haram? But I'm not here trying to prove a point that I'm right and you're wrong. I'm just giving you my opinion. I'm not so bullish in my opinion that I want to start laying money down. I'm just telling you, my opinion is, and I don't know whether Adelaide is ever going to fight Fraser Clark anyway, so that might never come up as a possibility. But if you ask me my opinion on Clark versus TKV, I would pick just Clark. I'm leaning towards a Fraser Clark victory. I'm not here supporting Fraser Clark or being a Fraser Clark fan. I don't care about Fraser Clark. I'm just giving you like a dispassionate, objective as I can be, analysis and prediction of how I would see the fight going. I'm not against Adelaide. I'm not for Clark. I don't do my predictions that way. I just base it on what I think would happen. But shout out to Ali for the super chat. Big up Swaggins. He says, big up Hatman and big up yourself, sir. Johnny the Frog says, rise and fall, climaxing and anti-climaxing. Ali says his left hand is too powerful and dangerous. Okay, well, if they ever fight, we'll see. And I'm not disputing that, by the way. I didn't say that Adelaide couldn't beat Fraser Clark. I said for argument's sake, let's say Adelaide could beat Fraser Clark. But because boxing is rock, paper, scissors, yeah, it doesn't mean that Fraser Clark couldn't beat TKV. Boxing is rock, paper, scissors. It's not linear. It's not like because fighter A beats fighter B and fighter B beats fighter C, that doesn't mean that fighter C can't beat fighter A. That's the way boxing is. It's all swings and roundabouts, Shout out to Ali for the super chat. Atavistic Intellect says, do you think it's possible that mythological symbols have come into existence through some sort of spiritual messaging passed down through prior epochs? Well, definitely some symbols absolutely have. Okay, I see what you're saying now. I think I see what you're saying. When you say prior epochs, are you talking about when humanity was maybe wiped out or went back to a very primitive state and then they had to become civilized all over again? And maybe these symbols were all that survived from the previous epochs and they were imbued with spiritual messaging? Is that what you mean? Indeed, signs and symbols, Confucius, that's right. Signs and symbols rule the world, not words or laws. And certainly, like, the secret societies communicate with symbolism rather than with words. Symbolism is a secret language. Only the initiated understand what the symbols mean. You know, I remember speaking to an absolute normie back in the days, I think on Facebook, and he couldn't understand why some people see certain symbols as like sinister. He said, it's a symbol. What's a symbol gonna do to you? Ha ha ha. And he was like mocking it. And so I put it in terms that a simple-minded person like him might be able to understand and comprehend. And I said, well, let's say you're walking through LA and you see some gang signs on the wall. Are you afraid of that gang sign? And he, oh, well, it's gangs though. No, how is it different, you donut? It's not the symbol itself, it's what it represents. So when you stumble into a certain neighborhood in LA and you see a sign up on the wall, right? And you understand that that sign is representative of a particular gang, you're thinking, well, I need to get the hell out of here. I understand the connotations of that sign, what it means, who's behind it. It was not the symbol itself, it's what that symbol represents and who the symbol represents. Shout out to Ali for the super chat. He says, Adam Booth wouldn't train him for nothing if he was not good enough to go beyond his potential. Adam said on a talk sport, he has some real potential. Adam Booth is paid by David Adeleye, so he's not going to say anything bad about him, is he? And I'm sure Adam Booth sees some potential, but he's seen potential in Josh Kelly, right? I think Adam Booth at one point said Josh Kelly is like the most talented fighter he's worked with, but what has Josh Kelly actually done? So, Adeleye, I like Adelaye's attitude. He's very alpha and aggressive. And even though he lost against Hrvogic, he didn't feel sorry for himself in the fight. When he got dropped, he came roaring back. And he rocked Hrvogic in that 8th round. So I like the attitude from Adeleye. He just needs a lot of refinement, you know? He needs a lot of... he needs a lot more experience. A lot more experience. He has potential there, I think, but for me, his future is kind of uncertain as far as how far he can go. There's power there, but his volume was so low against Hrvogic, it was startling how few punches he was throwing. Maybe it's a confidence thing, you know? Maybe he's not that confident in his own stamina yet. And David Hay actually gave Adelaide some advice after the fight with Hrvogic. He said he thinks Adelaide just needs to weigh off the weightlifting and bring his body weight down to maybe the 230s, low 230s. And he thinks there he'll still be powerful enough, but he'll have a lot more speed and he'll be more confident in his stamina. So maybe you should take David Haye's advice. Obviously, David Haye, formerly trained by Adam Booth. And just lay off the weights, and that will help the stamina, the fluidity, and whatnot. David Haye, been there, seen it, done it. So probably good advice, I would imagine. Shout out to Ali for the super chat. Supersized Fry says, will you ever pick a country to live permanently? I'm not sure. Maybe I'll pick a country as my base, but I like traveling around and going to different places. But I guess once the kids start being born, maybe the traveling will be less and there'll be more of a permanent place. We'll see. Ali says Hrvogic was a step-up test for him, a level up. Oh, indeed it was. He didn't pass the test, though. Didn't manage to pass the test. Again, he showed toughness in the fight. He got knocked down and he came back. He didn't crumble after he got dropped. He was like a cornered animal and he came out swinging. And that's what you want to see. So that was a positive to take from the fight for Adelaide. That when it looked like he might get stopped, he didn't just crumble mentally, he came out swinging. You want to see that. So, you know, he has some attributes there, power and aggression, but does he have the boxing brain? Can he develop the kind of boxing brain that's needed? Will he have the stamina? These are all questions that have to be answered in the future with David Adelaide, because he doesn't have those things right now. He doesn't have the boxing skills right now and the stamina right now to beat a Filip Hrvogic. That's been proven. So can he have him in the future? We'll see. Johnny the Frog says, I could envision the Hatman eventually settling down under in Australia. Yeah, that ain't happening. That's definitely not happening. It will not be Australia for me. Shout out to Aiden for the super chat. He says, should AJ be in the Hall of Fame if Partridge is? People say no. If Arturo Gatti is in the Hall of Fame, AJ should be in the Hall of Fame. But as somebody else said earlier on, in a previous stream actually, it's the Hall of Fame, not necessarily the Hall of Achievement, right? It's right there in the name, how famous a fighter was and how much influence they had on the boxing culture and how popular they were, more so than how good they were. I guess that's the best way to describe it. It's more so about how popular a fighter was rather than how good they were. And so if you're basing it at least partly on popularity, then obviously AJ's got to be in the Hall of Fame. But like I say, Arturo Gatti had those vicious fights with Mickey Ward. The reality is neither Arturo Gatti nor Mickey Ward were great fighters. But they're both in the Hall of Fame. So if guys like that are in the Hall of Fame, yeah, AJ's in the Hall of Fame as well. Partridge too. The barrier for entry is not particularly high to get into the Hall of Fame. A shout out to Gaz. He says, you missed my super chat earlier about 7 chats back. Pardon me for that. I'm scrolling up to have a look. Yeah, sorry about that, bro. I did miss that one. Thoughts on Sergey Derevyanchenko, 16-6. Tough as. Yeah, Derevyanchenko and Neely, man. Very unfortunate not to get the decision against Gennady Golovkin. In fact, let me jog my memory with Derevyanchenko and all the fights he had. He fought Danny Jacobs. Jaime Munguia was a more recent fight. Obviously, the Golovkin fight. Let me refresh my memory with regards to his entire career. He fought Christian and Billy as well. 40 years of age now. Yeah, lost that split decision to Danny Jacobs. Very close fight. Many people feel like he was hard done by there. Many people feel like he was hard done by in the Golovkin fight. I've already mentioned that. Lost to Jamal Charlo legitimately. That wasn't controversial. The Adames, I don't think I ever saw the Adames fight. I didn't see Adames versus Derevyanchenko, but here on BoxRec it says it was a majority decision loss for Derevyanchenko. Lost to Munguia, and he legitimately lost. Did he actually? How close was that fight? I forget now. On the scorecards here, it shows it being very close. I don't recall much about the Munguia-Derevyanchenko fight somehow. But the Mbili fight, he suffered some type of injury early on, Derevyanchenko. And Mbili was able to win that fight comfortably in the end. But yeah, a nearly man, Sergey Derevyanchenko, really should have been crowned world champion against Golovkin, in my opinion. He was the first person to noticeably hurt Golovkin. It was with a body shot. I'd never seen Golovkin like clearly hurt before in a fight prior to that Derevyanchenko match. So yeah, very unlucky. Again, to use the old boxing term, a nearly man. Never got to become a world champion. Shout out to Gaz. Again, apologies for missing the previous super chat I just read earlier on. Usually when I'm on one of my tangents, I'm not looking at the live chat. I'm just finishing my thought first. Big up Gaz. Big up Ali. He says, did you watch Richard Riakporhe's fight at heavyweight against Tommy Welch? Second round demolition, 3 knockdowns. Yes, I did watch it. But he wasn't in with much, you know. He really wasn't in with much. As soon as that fight started, Tommy Welch looked so novice-y, skittish, and Riakporhe, you could just tell by the body language, vastly more experienced, way more confident. My first comments that I made at the start of that fight in my Element group at the time were Tommy Welch, because I hadn't seen Tommy Welch fight before. Maybe 1 or 2 clips, but never an actual full fight. I watched his dad fight back in the 90s, and my first impressions were Tommy Welch looks nervous, and he doesn't look anywhere near as talented as his dad. Doesn't look as strong as his dad. His dad was like a bull of a man. Thick neck and just a big, naturally powerfully built guy, Scott Welch. And Tommy Welch doesn't have that kind of powerful build like his dad. And just seemed totally out of his depth. Throwing too many punches too early, which Riakporhe was blocking easily. And then Riakporhe landed a right hand a few times, and that's all she wrote. So I'm sure Billy Nelson's going to be singing Riakporhe's praises from the rooftops, as he tends to do with his fighters. But that really didn't tell us anything, you know. That was an easy fight for Riakporhe against the totally overmatched Tommy Welch. So the jury is still out for me as far as what Riakporhe can do at heavyweight, if anything. We shall see. Shout out to Ali. What it did show me, though, is Riakporhe, similar to Lawrence Okolie, was killing himself beyond belief to make 200 pounds cruiserweight. Because even at heavyweight, I mean, unlike Okolie, Riakporhe at heavyweight, what did he weigh for that fight? 230 something? He's still absolutely chiseled. So he's literally got 30 pounds of extra muscle on. Well, it wouldn't be 30 pounds really, because he would have dehydrated himself to make the cruiserweight limit, then rehydrated up to at least 210. So maybe let's say 25 pounds. It's probably 25 pounds of muscle extra on him now compared to when he was fighting at cruiserweight. 15 to 25 pounds, something like that. So maybe he'll be a lot sharper at heavyweight. Shout out to D-Man, he says, do you think the level of disrespect AJ gets is overdone? Yes, without a shadow of a doubt it is. Not that he doesn't deserve any criticism, but people go overboard with it. 100%, yes. What do you think though, D-Man? Shout out to Supersized Fries, he says, please start a golden era fighter career reviews. Which golden era and which division? Do you mean the heavyweight division now? Or do you mean heavyweight division in the 90s or the 70s or other divisions? Just expand on that a little bit for me, please. Supersized Fries. Shout out to Ali for the super chat. He says, so if Tommy Welch is nobody for Richard to fight, who's Lawrence Beer heavyweight to be ranked number 1 by the WBC? Nobody. I think you might be, Ali, I think you might be kind of misreading my approach to boxing. If I say that Tommy Welch was nobody for Riakporhe to fight a heavyweight, you shouldn't automatically assume that I'm a Lawrence Okolie fan. Do you know what I mean? That's not the way I work. I'll criticize every fighter. It doesn't matter who the fighter is. If they're fighting a nobody, I'll say they're a nobody. So if I'm saying that Riakporhe fought a nobody and Tommy Welch, it doesn't mean that I'm therefore going to be biased in favor of his rival Lawrence Okolie. I don't work like that. But yeah, the Tommy Welch fight told us nothing about Riakporhe because he was in with a kid that was totally overmatched. Lawrence Okolie doesn't deserve such a high ranking with the WBC, but certainly his last opponent, Kevin Lorena, is way better than Tommy Welch. I mean, that goes without saying. Kevin Lorena is definitely better than Tommy Welch. But I would agree with you that, yeah, he doesn't deserve the WBC ranking that he's got. Shout out to D-Man for the super chat. He says, I noticed so many grown men happy to see him lose. I have a feeling it's because he was popular with women. Yeah, I've always felt that's part of it. Because I've never known a boxer in the UK to be as popular with women as Anthony Joshua. I've never known anything like it. All of these women who pay no attention to boxing, all of a sudden when Anthony Joshua came around, women are watching boxing, they're talking to me about Anthony. I'm like, And of course, they were all huge fans of his. But it also shows how fickle women are, right? Once AJ got battered by Andy Ruiz, all those women who were, symbolically falling at his feet, they didn't want to watch him anymore. Boxing fans are fickle in general, but women are even more fickle than men. And when they see a guy have his masculinity taken down several notches by a guy who, in the eyes of a casual, shouldn't be beating Anthony Joshua because he's a short, fat guy, all of a sudden they are not so attracted to AJ anymore because of that. Okay, Supersized Fries says, I'm talking about greats from the past like Jack Johnson, Jack Dempsey, Joe Louis, etc. Oh, okay. When it comes to fighters from the 20s and going all the way back there, 20s, 30s, 40s, I don't know as much about those fighters as I do about fighters from the 70s, 60s and on. I know something about them, obviously. Jack Johnson and, Jack Dempsey, Joe Louis. To briefly give an overview of those fighters, Jack Johnson, of course, the first black heavyweight champion. He won the title in Australia. At the time when Jack Johnson became heavyweight champion, prior to that, it was illegal for black fighters to contest the championship. Jack Johnson was a very controversial character. This was at a time when there was still like Jim Crow in the South. It was very dangerous to be a black man in America back then. And Jack Johnson was unafraid, it seems, because he upset the authorities by dating white women and stuff like that. He was very flashy. He was perceived to be disrespectful towards his usually white opponents. He had gold teeth in his mouth. I mean, Jack Johnson was like the precursor to a lot of these rappers today. Yeah? That's the kind of time he was on. Like I say, mouthful of gold teeth. I mean, today Jack Johnson would have been like, you know, one of the PBC crowd as far as his aesthetic. Gold jewelry all over the place, trash talking. That's who Jack Johnson would have been in today's context. A brave guy. There's no question about it. But in terms of his boxing style, he was a very defensive boxer. Not entertaining to watch. He was physically strong. Jack Johnson, very physically strong. Back then, the gloves that they wore were so small. Maybe they were like 4-ounce gloves. They were more like mitts. You know, like bag mitts? That's kind of like the gloves they were wearing during Jack Johnson's time. So you'd often see, and the clinching was very different back then. So you'd often see in Jack Johnson fights, he would literally grab a guy's arm and twist their arm behind their back. Somehow that was permitted in those days of Queensberry Rules boxing. He'd twist a guy up like a pretzel with that physical strength. And he eventually, of course, lost to Jess Willard. There was some suggestion that he threw the fight, that the fight was fixed. Obviously, there was a lot more fixed fights back then with the mob involvement in boxing and all that kind of thing. So there was some suggestion that the Willard fight was fixed. But I remember watching a Mike Tyson documentary that he did with Harry Carpenter. I think it was called A Trip Through Boxing History with Mike Tyson. And Mike Tyson, being the boxing historian he is, he gave his take on the Johnson-Willard thing. And his rationale was that he didn't think Johnson would take a dive against Jess Willard because it was like the 13th round. If you were going to take a dive, surely you'd take a dive early on in the fight and save yourself the beating that he took against Jess Willard. So who knows? But yeah, that was Jack Johnson in a nutshell. And then, of course, what ties Jack Johnson to Jack Dempsey is that Jack Dempsey's the one who beat Jess Willard. So he beat the man who beat Jack Johnson. And Jack Dempsey came in, he was like 6 foot, 6'1", something like that. 180 pounds, 190 pounds, skinny. And he went in there against Jess Willard, who was like 6'6", 250 pounds. And he beat the brakes off him in like one round. Dropped him however many times. Was it 6 times or something? So, yeah, Jack Dempsey, the Manassa Mauler, was, he grew up, he was part, I think, Cherokee. Is that right? Jack Dempsey, he was of Irish descent, but I'm sure he had some kind of like Native American background in there as well. Jack Dempsey. He had like dark hair, kind of an olive complexion, and grew up brawling in bars and stuff like that. When he progressed to professional boxing, he took that bar brawling style in there with him, refined it a little bit. He used to move his head and roll underneath shots and then come up with vicious combinations. A very, very aggressive fighter. But yeah, big up. We will see. If I get time, I'll do some career reviews for some of these old timers. Big up Supersized Fries. Shout out to Ali. He says, the reason why he has that WBC ranking is because of that WBC Bridgerweight champion status, the WBC belt he won and gave it up for ranking in heavyweight. Yeah, that's similar to what the WBO do. Because the WBO, when you're a champion in one weight class, if you move up a weight class while still holding onto that belt, you become immediate mandatory for the WBO in the weight class above. So I guess the WBC have started implementing something similar. Although it's not really similar though, is it? Because, well, no, it's similar, but it's not the same. Because the WBC didn't make Okolie mandatory or even #1 contender. They just gave him a relatively high ranking. I think he was ranked, was it number 4 or 5 when he first moved up to heavyweight by the WBC? He might be ranked a bit higher now because he's had a couple of fights at heavyweight. But when he first moved up to heavyweight, the WBC straight away installed him at like number 5 or something, which is ridiculous. But there you go, that's what they do. Big up Ali for the super chat. Big up D-Man, he says, what's your favorite biopic of all time? Mine would be Ray with Jamie Foxx. Ray is very good with Jamie Foxx. I also like Malcolm X. That starred obviously Denzel Washington. Another good one would be Raging Bull with Robert De Niro and Joe Pesci. But it was crazy how Jamie Foxx not only sounded just like Ray Charles, but looked like him. Do you know what I mean? His facial expressions and everything. He literally looked like Ray Charles in that movie. Supersized Fries says, my favorite Jack Johnson story is when he was pulled over for speeding. The officer issued him a £50 fine. He gave the officer 100. The officer said, I can't give change. And he said, yeah, that's for the trip back. Yeah, that story is hilarious. That's the fine from when I'm on, when I'm on the way back. Yo, Jack Johnson, definitely hilarious. Yeah, keep the change when I'm coming back. There you go. That's what he said, yeah. Yeah, Denzel Washington in Malcolm X, that's one of his best ever performances. He was fantastic in Malcolm X. And his voice, yeah, like you say, Denzel Washington's voice in that Malcolm X movie, I think his voice is kind of similar to Malcolm X's voice anyway, to be fair, but he tailored it to sound even more like Malcolm X in the movie. Yeah, Champions Forever is a great documentary. Thankfully, that's on YouTube now. Anyone to watch. That's a documentary about Ali, Frazier, Foreman, Norton, Holmes in the 1970s, 60s and 70s. It mainly centers around Ali's career, but it brings in all his rivals as well. They basically have a look back over their careers in the 60s and 70s, and then they have like a meal at the end and they're all debating and whatnot. So yeah, Champions Forever is fantastic for anyone who hasn't seen it. I love the way that documentary starts, because it starts with this really like emotive classical music and these snippets of Mike Tyson knocking out Larry Holmes, because it's like a passing of the torch fight between that 1970s heavyweight crop, the last of which was Larry Holmes. I mean, Larry Holmes obviously was champion in the 80s, but he rose to prominence at the back end of the 70s. So it was a passing of the torch fight between Larry Holmes and Ali. That was in the 80s, but a passing of the torch also earlier on when he beat Kenny Norton. And then, as I say, the documentary starts with this like really kind of emotive classical music and these slow motion clips of Mike Tyson knocking out Larry Holmes, ushering in the new era and the end of, you know, the Ali generation, if you like, and the generation just after Ali. Yes, I'm very well versed in the Nation of Islam's beliefs. Obviously, a lot of them are outlined in the movie, Malcolm X. But yeah, I know all about the Nation of Islam's beliefs. The Nation of Islam's beliefs, they have a mythology, basically. And the mythology is very similar, ironically, to Nazi mythology. You know, the Nazis had a mythology about this Aryan race that lived in the caverns underneath the earth and all this business. The Nation of Islam mythology is similar. And there is a spin-off of the Nation of Islam, or a connected group called the Nuwapians. They're kind of a cult. And the leader of the cult is still alive. He's called, his real name is Dwight York. Not the footballer Dwight York, but that's his real name, or one of his names anyway. But he was more commonly known as Malachi Z. York. He's still in prison now. And his beliefs kind of piggybacked off of the Nation of Islam beliefs, but went into more depth and had more of, you know, his mythology had an even deeper backstory to it, and was even more similar to like the Nazi mythology, but just a black version of like Nazi mythology. But of course, they don't believe it's mythology, they believe it's like real history. Yeah, indeed. That's right, Johnny the Frog. He says, yes, that intro to Champions Forever with the classical music is incredibly moving. And then Mike Tyson giving praise to Larry Holmes is so moving. Yeah, it is. It might be the best intro for a boxing documentary ever. I always love that intro. It's very, very emotive, very moving. The way they did it with, you know, the classical music and the slow motion clips, and because you understood what it meant. Do you know what I mean? You understood the significance of what you were looking at in that passing of the torch fight. A supersized Fry says, what's the level of wealth where you currently live? You mentioned your home being $900 a month. How many of the natives do you think could afford that place? Very few. The average salary for a doctor in Lusaka is about £700 a month. For a doctor. So that'll put it in perspective. The rent on this place is more than a doctor's entire salary for a month. So but saying that, you know, Lusaka is so cheap that doctors live well here. You know, doctors live in nice houses and they drive nice cars, but they're doing it on like, you know, £700 a month, £1,000 a month. That's just a measure of how cheap it is, right? Because The doctor's making £700 a month, or let's say £800, £900 a month. They're living in nice 2-3 bedroom houses, not in a gated community, but nice 2-3 bedroom houses and whatnot. Got their cars and everything. But yeah, it's wild. The disparity in earnings between somewhere like here in the West, like it's wild. Yeah, I'm just the same, Johnny the Frog. I watch that intro over and over again as well. So if you're weird, I'm weird too. Because I love that intro. Atavistic Intellect says, what are the top earning professionals in Zambia? I'm going to imagine that the top earning professionals will be entrepreneurs and also people involved in mining, because mining is very big here. Mining for things like copper and other metals and minerals and whatnot. Like there's a lot of mining in this country. So I would imagine people connected to those industries are going to be the highest earners. I would guess, certain people that own their own companies or, haulage companies and stuff like that, shipping, or actual mining companies. Well, anywhere in the developing world, foreigners are seen as a meal ticket. So, you come to, even in Costa Rica, you get gringo priced all over the place. It's definitely the same in Africa. Once they know you're foreign, which is not hard for them to know that you're foreign. Even if you're black, they can tell you're foreign in like 2 seconds. Usually by what you're wearing, the fact, your accent, all that kind of stuff. And people are going to try and overcharge you. People are going to try and scam you and all that kind of. That's just comes with the territory when you move to a developing country. It is what it is. B. Wayne says, is Zambia better than Zimbabwe? I haven't been to Zimbabwe yet. I plan to go. When I do go, I'll be able to tell you. I would guess Zambia's economy is in much better shape. That's one thing I do know. So economically, Zambia is doing a lot better than Zimbabwe. And there are a lot of Zimbabweans here, particularly students. Like Zambia is absolutely flooded with Zimbabwean students. Loads and loads of Zimbabweans come here to go to university. Whereas you don't get the reverse. You don't get loads of Zambians going to Zimbabwe to go to uni. It doesn't happen. But you get loads of Zimbabweans coming here for education. Lieutenant Frank says, we don't hear much of Dominic Ingle fighters nowadays. I wonder, has the Sheffield gym had its day in the sun? Well, it's never really been the same since Brendan passed away, right? Dominic hasn't been anywhere near as successful as his dad Brendan was. As weird as that gym is, you know, the weirdness aside, because that gym's always been weird. Yeah, Brendan Ingle was weird. But if we just focus on the boxing, Brendan Ingle, although he was quite a disciplinarian, he was also somewhat of a charming and a fun character, right? And he knew how to deal with different personalities and bring certain things out of the fighters. Dominic Ingle doesn't have that same thing his dad had. That's my perception anyway. I mean, I don't know what is up with this Dominic Ingle guy. He never expresses any emotion at all, never smiles. He's always got this stoic, almost wannabe tough guy persona. I mean, this is a guy who apparently had one amateur fight and he was so useless, he literally turned around and begged to be saved in the fight by his dad. A guy like that should be the most friendly, cheerful boxing trainer out there. You know what I mean? But he has this just weird demeanor and weird attitude, which I really don't appreciate. Dominic Ingle. But all that aside, yeah, he just doesn't seem to have what his dad had. The imagination, the creativity, the interpersonal skills. That gym's never been the same since Brendan passed away. And that's what I'll say about that. All right, peeps, let's shut this one down. We're streaming for several hours. As always, special shout out to those who donated via Super Chat. They were Supersized Fries, Ali, Kayvon Green, Linkage, Atavistic Intellect, Hayden, Striker, Gaz, Arcane Code, Swaggins. I think I said Supersized Fries already. D-Man. Yeah, big up. Special shout out to those who donated via Super Chat. And shout out to everyone else who joined in the conversation. Until next time, take care, be good. I'll catch you on the other side. I'm out.